Unto the Hills by Margaret Walker Freel. Chapter 30. Whatever the years of 61 through 65 may have meant, the South, the North, may it become dead history. Dwell not upon mistakes of yesterday. Nay, rather, we, God's humbled children, learning through tribulation, must reach out for a new year. The years past, the yesterdays are gone. Tomorrow is a new day. Let not man care for yesterday, except in so far as the events of yesterday bring wisdom to guide the footsteps of tomorrow. Let the tragedy and torment of the terrible past bind America into a new brotherhood. May the bonds of a glorious heritage unite young America as one people. May the children of men follow in the footsteps of the Prince of Peace. Neither shall they learn war any more. Margaret had gone into the yard on an errand. The nondescript mongrel which had taken up residence without invitation a few days previously insisted on attention. She jumped greedily on Margaret and left muddy footprints on her fresh dress. Margaret scolded, "Get down, Fanny. You have gone and dirtied my clean dress. I wish you were back where you came from. I don't need or want a dog. I wish you would kill this hateful dog, Amy," she said in jest to the little black Amy, who was standing nearby. "She pesters the life out of me." "Yassum, she is powerful pestrous. I wishes she was dead too." Margaret returned to the house and went about her evening chores. Some time later, Pitt called her aside. "Mother, did you tell Amy to kill that stray dog, Fanny?" "Of course not, Pitt. Why, Amy couldn't kill a dog anyway. What are you talking about?" Margaret paused, then she remembered. "Oh, good heavens! She didn't take me seriously, did she? I did make some such comment earlier today when the dog jumped on me and soiled my dress. But what has that simple girl done now? Bless her, she has so little sense you have to make allowances for her. But goodness, this is too much." The younger boys came over to where Margaret and Pitt were talking, and there was much snickering and laughing as they related the tale to their mother. "We had started to the barn," began Pitt. "We heard Amy talking over behind the peach tree hedge. We peeped over to see who she was talking to." George interrupted. "I told Pitt I thought she was up to something and that we better slip up and see what it was." McLean continued the story. "So we sneaked up to the hedge and didn't let her know we were there." Pitt impatiently took up the story again. "What do you reckon we saw? Amy had Fanny tied with a rope and was holding her head on the chopping block at the woodpile. She had the axe in her hand and she was talking up a storm to old Fanny. She said, 'The missus don't like you, Fanny, 'cause you dirties her dresses.' She told Amy to kill you dead. I hates that like the devil to do this, but I has to do what the missus says. She always knows best." Rufus then had his say. "And mother, Amy put her arms around Fanny and began to cry like everything." Pitt, of course, didn't appreciate the interruption, and he continued his narrative. "Then you know what? All of a sudden she says, 'When white folks dies, they says prayers. You's get up from there, Fanny, and we'ns are going to say some prayers.' And then she said, 'Lord, take care of this here old yaller dog.' Then she cried some more." Margaret had listened long enough. "Boys, don't stand there and tell me that you let crazy Amy beat the brains out of that poor animal. She couldn't kill her." They all snickered again. Finally, Pitt controlled himself to continue. "No, Ma, when she got done praying and picked up the axe again, I said, 'Amy, don't you hurt that dog. I don't believe Mother wanted you to really kill her.'" George added, "And Mother, she didn't know we were there, and when Pitt spoke it scared her into a fit. She hollered and screamed something awful." "You sure she didn't hurt the poor little dog?" "Oh, no. I turned the pesky thing loose and told Amy not to worry about it, that I knew you didn't mean it. But I sure wish you could have seen her making that dog get down on her haunches and pray." Whereupon both mother and sons laughed until the tears ran. Since Pitt had reopened the trading post, it had once again become the gathering place for the men of the county. One day, John Tatham, who had moved to Chiowa Valley, returned for a brief visit. As he entered the store, David Hennessy said, "John, I hear you folks over on Chiowa are getting too big for us folks here in Cherokee. What's this tale about you all wanting to become a county all separate from us?" "I guess what you heard was pretty straight. You know it's a long way from our place to Murphy for court. It's about 25 miles, and that takes a long time to travel. We did get a post office back in 1843, and that was an awful lot of help. You remember we used to have to come all the way over here for our mail. Well, we all got together and got B.K. Dickey to take care of us in the legislature. Did you have any trouble getting what you wanted?" "We sure did. It took some scrapping with some of you Cherokee folks, but we finally got our way. Some of us went down to Raleigh and prodded old Dickey so hard he introduced the bill to make us a separate county. We had our county named Graham for William Alexander Graham. He's a big man in the state, and thought if we named the county for him he might help us some day. He was our governor, you know." "Who have you elected as county officers?" asked Pitt. "We put in some mighty good men. For county commissioners we have J. Culverd, John Goley, J.W. Hooper, N.F. Cooper, and John Sawyer. Sawyer resigned and they put in David Hyde. They met at King and Cooper's store and made Culverd chairman. Wiley King is justice of the peace, and he swore them in." Abram Collett interposed. "I took some wool over to John Barker on Long Creek for him to card. You know he's an Englishman, and he's a tinner by trade. He inherited some money from his folks in the old country. He took it and put up a carding machine and a turning lathe. When I take wool over, it generally takes him and his wife all day and night to work it up. I always spend the night, and he told me all about the organizing the county seat." "I heard they had an argument about where it was to be," said Hennessy. "Oh, of course. Where there's people, there's arguments. Nobody sees things alike, and everybody wants his own way. But let John finish telling who they elected as officers." "Well, let's see here. The commissioners elected William Carpenter, Register of Deeds, John Hyde as sheriff, Reuben Carver as surveyor, John Barker as treasurer, George Slaughter as entry taker, and I was elected clerk. Now, Collett, you go ahead with what you were saying about the county seat." "Well, as John Barker told me, the commissioners and the county officers picked the place. They had a time of it. They looked at 3 places. Most everybody wanted Fort Hill, where old Fort Montgomery was. Others wanted Rhea Ridge. B.L. Sawyer owned that land. Some pulled for this because it was near the King Cooper store. Well, anyway, Barker said that the tale that's got out about everybody getting drunk at the time of the picking was a lie. I know John Barker well, and I believe he would tell the truth. Well, they finally settled on Rhea Ridge." John Tatham spoke again. "They've put Reuben Carver to surveying the town. G.M. Ditmore and J.P. Ammons are to stake the lots. They plan to have a sale of lots soon. Boys, you all must come over and buy some." "Well, what about a courthouse and a jail? Do you have plans for them?" asked Hennessy. "Oh, yes. There are plans afoot for them. They held the first court in the Baptist church on Fort Hill. They have contracted with John Hyde to build a courthouse on the northwest corner of the square. He has a year to build it. They are to pay him a little over $1,000. They haven't traded yet for the jail, but they do plan to build one soon." "Sounds like you're getting someplace over there," commented Hennessy. "We sure are, boys," crowed Tatham. "Come over in about a year. We'll show you folks how to run a county. Oh, by the way, we are planning a whale of a celebration right away. All you come over and help. The more the merrier, and anyway, you ought to help us out. Pitt, you be sure to come over. You might want to start a store over there." The thought of expanding his business appealed to Pitt. He could hardly wait to get home to discuss it with Margaret. "Hey, Ma!" he shouted as he entered the inn. "They're doing big things over in Chiowa Valley. They have organized a new county called Graham. John Tatham says there are big opportunities in the making." But Margaret was in no mood to listen at that moment. and Pitt recognized a look of distress on his mother's face as soon as he paused long enough to look at her. "What's wrong? Has something happened?" "It's McLean," responded Margaret. "I knew he had something on his mind." "What is it?" asked Pitt. "I thought he was pretty happy helping me at the store." "Well, evidently he isn't. He says he's old enough to get out on his own. You remember he disappeared yesterday and wouldn't tell what he was up to. Well, he told me today he met with James Weeks and that James wants him to go with him to Texas." "Texas? Great Scott, why Texas? I don't think McLean would like it out there. They say the climate is bad and is still a wild and woolly place. Besides, he isn't strong, what with having had asthma all his life. He ought to stay here where we can take care of him. I don't know why these other boys keep wanting to go to faraway places. Me, I'm going to stay right here in Cherokee County. Do you want me to talk with him? Maybe try to talk him out of it?" "No, Pitt, I really don't think it'd make any difference to him. He wants to go off and see how things are on his own. He says you boss him here and that Agnew went off and is making good. James has stuffed him with all that about Texas being a new state and how many opportunities there are out there. Well, I guess if he wants to go, he won't be satisfied until he tries it." "Pitt, he wants to borrow a little money from us. He saved some, but I don't think he has enough. I guess the only thing to do is to help him test his wings, but I sure do hate to see him go." Just then the door flew open, and two darkies made an unannounced entrance. Little Ann and Jenny, both talking and neither making sense. "Whoa there," said Pitt. "Slow down so we can understand what you're talking about." "What's happened?" asked Margaret. "Amy's done it again. She was stirring the soap kettle and that lazy Negro done went to sleep." "So?" said Margaret. "That isn't a crime." "But she done fell in the soap pot." Margaret didn't wait for Jenny to finish. She started calling orders to the other blacks and hurried to see if Amy were seriously hurt. With the help of the others, they soon had Amy lying on the couch in the kitchen, and Margaret was carefully removing the soap, ashes, and clothing. When these were removed, it was found that she was not seriously hurt. The right hand and arm were burned, but not severely so. As she worked on the child's injuries, Margaret spoke soothingly to Amy. "We're all sorry you had an accident, but accidents do happen. We're happy that the calamity was not any worse. I know this hurts, but you are not badly burned, and keeping it greased and airtight, it will soon ease. Just lie there and be quiet." So Amy was put to bed and cared for until she was well. So Pitt's plans and excitement over the possibilities available to him in Graham County remained unspoken, as they were pushed into the background by McLean's decision to leave home and Amy's accident. In fact, it wasn't until after McLean left home that the subject was again broached. The morning following McLean's departure, Pitt held a conference with his brother George, and then announced to his mother, "Ma, George is going to keep the store for me today. He's 18 now and needs to learn what it is to have the responsibility for himself. McLean is gone, so George will have to fill his shoes." "And what are you planning to do, Pitt? Since you say George is going to be in the store alone, where will you be?" "I thought I would go over to the big celebration in Chiowa Valley." Though Pitt's tone was casual, there was excitement in his eyes. "Thought I'd do some looking around, maybe stay a few days. George can manage here all right." "Be sure you stop by and speak to Captain Slaughter. He's a fine man and was good to us. Tell him we miss him since he's moved over there. Give my regards to him." After Pitt was on his way, Margaret questioned George. "What's Pitt up to? I'm sure he has something on his mind. Said he'd be gone for several days." "He was telling me some of the things John Tatham's been talking about going on over in the new county. He never did actually say so, but he hinted that he would like to have another store over there." "I thought as much. Pitt is a born trader. He'll have something one of these days." Then Margaret changed the subject to George's plans. "How about you?" she asked. What do you think you'd like to do?" "I guess I'd like to be in a store too. I figure I'm more like Father. Pitt wants to trade horses and things, but I like to sell things in the store." "Well, here's your chance to do some selling. It's time to open the store." Pitt's visit to the new county of Graham was interesting and enjoyable. It was spring of 1873. People had turned out to celebrate the formation of the new county. Politician John Tatham grasped Pitt's hand with a hearty handshake. "We're glad you came over, Pitt. Here, I want you to meet some of our Graham County folk. Here's a couple of old timers, Jack Grant and Marion Carringer. This is Thomas Cooper and Wiley King. King swore in our commissioners. Here are the commissioners, Colvard, Hooper, and Hyde. And here's Sheriff Jason Hyde. Over there are the other officers, Carver, John Barker, and Slaughter." Pitt went over to greet his old friend. "I'm mighty glad to see you, Captain Slaughter. I didn't learn much when I went to school to you over at the Chicken Sop School, but that wasn't your fault. Mother sends her regards and said that she misses you. You were mighty good to her and all of us when Father was taken." "Good to see you, Pitt. You'll get along all right even if you didn't study in school. I hear Agnew's prospering in the West. He was one of the finest students I ever taught. What's McLean doing now?" "James Weeks and McLean left yesterday to go to Texas. Ma thinks McLean will be pretty homesick. He was real anxious to leave, but we'll have to wait and see how well he likes it." "Well, did his asthma improve as he grew older?" "Sometimes it does, I understand," asked the former schoolteacher. "I guess it has. He hasn't been bothered much with it lately." "What about George? Is he still in school?" "Oh, George is about grown now. He's taken over the store while I'm over here. Ma says she thinks he's more like Pa than the rest of us boys." At this point, John Tatham returned to claim Pitt's attention. "See that house being built over there? That's our new courthouse. Under the hill, the jail has been started. This house over here is Wiley King's. The Cooper store is on a hill a little below here. But now, it's time to eat. Boys, let's go over to Moose Branch to the picnic grounds. We don't want to be late for that." The picnic grounds were a beehive of activity. Scores of gaily colored Indian baskets were being emptied of their delicious contents. "Great Scott, John, how long are these tables? Is everybody from the county here? I never saw so much food in one place in my life." "Yes, Pitt, I think we could take the census today. Everybody's here. I'd estimate these tables are 40 feet long." A quiet fell over the throng as Reverend Joseph Wiggins stepped to the head of one table, and Reverend Billy Morgan stepped to the head of the other. The Methodist and Baptist preachers took turns in vying with each other in lengthy but devout and impressive prayers of thanksgiving for the great occasion. When the blessings were finally at an end, the great assembly gave undivided attention to the mounds of food spread in front of them. "Graham County sure has some powerful good cooks," stated Pitt to Wiley King. "I agree," said Mr. King as he popped the final morsel into his mouth. "By the way, Pitt, why don't you come on down to the store and look around while you're here? You might get some ideas. A new place like this offers all kinds of opportunities for the enterprising young man." "I think you're right, Mr. King. How about us making a trade?" "That's just what I was hoping you'd say, Pitt. Cooper and me are getting old, and this place needs young folks like you." "I'll come over, and we can talk about it," said Pitt. Then both men turned to the program that was beginning over across the way. Conditions had at last begun to improve. Travelers were more numerous at the Walker Inn. By a strange coincidence, 3 ministers converged on the inn on the same day. Margaret treated each guest with equal importance. When they left, Margaret bid them adieu, and, thinking them on their way, busied herself with her morning task. When going through the hallway to her bedroom, Amy waylaid her. "Missus, one of them brother mans done come back." "Oh, I thought they had gone. I wonder why he came back." "Says he forgot something, and has gone to his room." "Which one was it, Amy?" Amy rolled her eyes in evident great distress. "Why, missus, I hates to say it, but I believes it sounds like Pisapalin." Margaret gasped at Amy's attempt to pronounce Episcopalian. To worsen the situation, the referred to gentleman made appearance at the same moment of Amy's remark. The man's face convulsed, and was evident that his ears had caught the conversation. Margaret hastily regained her composure and said, "Amy, go to the kitchen quickly. Jenny wants you." Horror-stricken, Amy fled in panic. At noon, Pitt came in with the morning mail. "Here's a letter for you from Grandma and another one from Agnew." Margaret hastily opened one and announced, "Grandma says Uncle Benjamin has professed religion. He's been baptized and joined the Briar Creek Church. Poor old soul, she's so happy over it." Then she opened the letter from Agnew, which she read more slowly. "What does he say?" asked the impatient Pitt. A broad smile crossed Margaret's face as she announced, "Pitt, I'm a grandmother." "Gosh, then that makes me Uncle Pitt. Sounds kind of funny. What is it, a boy?" "No, Pitt, it's a little girl. They have named her Elvie Fitch. That must be for some of Agnew's wife's people. Anyway, I'm awfully happy for Agnew. I must write him at once. How I would love to see the little one and hold her in my arms." "Never mind, Ma. Some day I'll have one for you to hold. But, Ma, if you have time, I do need to talk to you about something else." "Of course, Pitt." Margaret's voice was calm, but in her heart she feared another one of her sons was about to leave home. "I've been playing this over in my mind ever since my visit to Graham County. Mr. King and Mr. Cooper, who have a store over there, says they're getting old and they want me to buy them out. I believe it would be a good investment. What do you think?" Pitt watched his mother's face as she turned his statement over in her mind. At last she said, "It sounds like a good idea. If that's what you want. Have you done anything definite yet?" "Well, Mr. King came over here today and we traded." He paused for her to digest this statement. Then he continued, "I talked with George and he says that he would like to go in with me." "Do you mean you will send George over to Chihuahua to run the new store? Do you think he's old enough?" "George is 19 now. Agnew was that age when he left and he made good. I was that age when I started. George is a settled boy and I think he will work hard and make a go of it. As you say, he's a lot like Pa." "Well, when will he need to go?" "Just as soon as he can get ready. He could start the day after tomorrow." That night, Margaret called George into her room. "Pitt tells me you are interested in going over to Fort Montgomery." "Yes, Mother. I think I'm old enough and I want to do something. Try to get ahead. Since they moved things to Rhea Hill, they call the place Robbinsville. It'll be a town soon, and Pitt and I want to get on in the beginning of things. Of course, I'm sorry to see my boys leave, but you are a man and you need to live your own life. All I want is for you, and for all of my boys, is to be honest men like their father." Margaret paused, considering what she should say to this her son, who was about to leave the security of the family home to make his own way in the world. Of course she was thankful that he had chosen to remain closer to home than the other two, but still it would never be the same. It never is once a child leaves home. Finally she said, "George, you, like Agnew and McLean, are going away, out into the world to live your own life. We all would like to live our own lives as we please. We would like to say what we do is nobody's business. But we know that we cannot do as we please. Our actions have a thundering response, not only on our own lives, but on the lives of others. The tragic thing about a wrong today is that we live with the result of it tomorrow. If we sow to the wind, we reap the whirlwind. The thing that was thoughtless act today may be a heartache tomorrow. The Bible tells us that Judas had his tomorrow and went out and hanged himself. There is always a tomorrow, many, many to mock or to bless us. My son, there is no such thing as sowing as we please, or unfettered freedom. Freedom is not found in breaking moral law. It is not the right to do what we choose. It is the responsibility of choosing what is right. Character, my son, is something a man must build for himself out of the trials and errors of daily living. Above all, each one of us must strive to foster brotherly love. We must always do our utmost to bring peace to the world. Lastly, be an honest man like your father, George. There was silence for a while as the two sat in close communion, as each considered the future. Margaret thought, "One by one my children are leaving. All too soon there will be quiet and stillness in this big rambling house. Too soon she would be a lonely old lady sitting in her rocking chair, reliving the past." She shook these disquieting thoughts from her mind as she picked up a Bible and opened it and said to George, "Here's a Bible. George, I want you to read it. Take it with you and read some every night. Be sure to read Micah, the 6th chapter and 7th verse. It says, 'He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God.'" Margaret smiled as George took the Bible and leaned down to kiss her good night. He quietly left the room, and Margaret sat a deep while in thought, and then with a long sigh she got up and prepared to retire for the night. Chapter 31. Margaret paused in her reading to call to Pitt as he walked by. "Oh, Pitt, there's wonderful news here in Agnew's letter. They have moved to Wichita, Kansas, and he says little Elvie can talk now. He's been made secretary of the Wichita Library Association and is chairman of the City Board of Health. I'm so proud of Agnew, but here's the best news. They are talking about coming home for a visit." Pitt responded with interest concerning his brother, but soon went on his way. He had other things on his mind for the present. He was having girl trouble. Laura Tatham, who he had always considered his girl, was becoming more independent than Pitt was able to accept gracefully. It was one Sunday afternoon, when Pitt was aimlessly wandering through the house, that Margaret began to suspect her son's difficulty. "Pitt, how come you haven't gone over to Laura Tatham's? I thought you always went over there on Sunday afternoons. I know you came from the meeting house with her. Have you had another quarrel? You mustn't be so high-tempered." "Yes, we've had it again," responded Pitt, somewhat belligerently. "What's wrong?" asked Margaret. "Oh, we had a big fuss this time. I think I'll just get me another gal. That's it. I'll do it today. I'll get Dolly out, and I'll just ride over to Old Road Gap into Clay County. John Johnson on Tusquity has 4 mighty pretty girls. He's got lots of property, too. It'd be fine to marry a rich gal. Goodbye, Ma. Look for me when you see me." "Pitt, don't do anything foolish," admonished Margaret. "Just because you and Laura had a little fight. You've always liked her. You'll forget about this fuss soon." "No, I won't, Ma. This was it. I've taken all I'm going to take. See you later." And off he went. It was on the following Sunday, as she saw Pitt go out to get his horse, that Margaret asked, "Where are you going today, Pitt?" "Oh, Laura and me are going up to a ride up on Junaluska," was Pitt's nonchalant reply, as though nothing had happened. Margaret smiled to herself as she thought, "They've made up. I suspected as much." She said nothing to Pitt as she watched him ride off. However, Margaret was not prepared to see Pitt come riding home only a very short while after he had left. Wisely, she made no comment, for she could tell that Pitt was upset. She watched Pitt out of the corner of her eye as she sat in her favorite rocking chair, pondering her children. Agnew was ambitious, studious, and literary. McLean was sweet, kind, and thoughtful, yet ever and always breaking out with a little witty comment. George was stern, settled, and had a calculating legal mind. Rufus, her baby, her little redhead, true to tradition, was fractious and high-tempered. Yet always in a moment he was as repentant as he had been furious. And then there was Pitt. She had once said that Pitt was her problem child. He was full of energy. He would not study at school. He was always the one who came home with his clothes soiled or torn. Yet Margaret loved Pitt dearly, and she grieved for him. He would make life hard for himself, yet Margaret knew he would succeed. She got up and followed him as he moved towards the garden. She watched him as he paced restlessly about. Finally he stopped still, shoved his hands resolutely in his pockets, and said, half in anger and half in sorrow, "Ma, I'm nearly 30 years old. I've decided I'm going to get married." Margaret smiled. "Why, Pitt, that's fine. Of course, it's hard for a mother to face the fact that their children are grown, but I'm glad you want to settle down and have a family of your own. Laura's a sweet girl. She's been our neighbor all her life, and you two have grown up together. I've always liked her. When do you plan on getting married?" There was dead silence. Pitt frowned angrily. "I'm not marrying Laura." "Oh," was Margaret's only retort. With withering scorn, Pitt burst into a fury of passion. "Laura and me, we just can't get along. She's too blamed independent. I'm not going to toady for no woman." He paused for a moment, then continued, "Laura and me were riding along, having a good time, when along comes this son of a bitch who challenges her to a race. And what does she do? She gives her horse a cut, and the last I saw them they were hightailing it up the road like grease lightning. I came on home. They can keep on going to Franklin or hell if they want to. I'm done with Laura." "Oh, Pitt, I'm sorry." Margaret could feel Pitt's misery. "Laura's only high-spirited. She'll be sorry when she finds out that she's hurt your feelings. I'm sure it happened so quickly that she didn't stop to think. Just wait. Take time to calm down. Things will look different tomorrow." "They ain't going to be any different tomorrow for me. I've decided to marry Sally Johnson from Tuskwitty. She's mighty pretty, and I like her a lot." "Pitt, it's your life and your decision, but don't act in haste. You're right that you're nearly 30 and old enough to marry. I've never seen Sally Johnson. What do you know about her?" Margaret paused. She could tell from the set expression on Pitt's face that he was in no mood for good advice, or for advice of any kind for that matter. "I've made my mind up. When I make my mind up, I don't change." "All I ask is that you think it over carefully. Don't do anything out of stubbornness. This is a serious decision, not one to be made in haste. Remember, marriage is forever." Resolutely, Pitt turned away. "I've made up my mind, Mother. I'm going to marry Sally Johnson, if she'll have me, and I think she will." He kissed his mother and left the room. The following Saturday, Pitt spent most of the day grooming his horse and cleaning and polishing the buggy. Margaret watched from her bedroom window and silently prayed for his happiness. Early Sunday morning, as an immaculately groomed Pitt left the house, he called back to his mother, "Ma, sort of fix up my room today. You've always said you wished you had a girl. Well, I'm bringing one home tonight." And with that, he was gone. Margaret stood silent as she watched him out of sight. Then she sighed as she turned to do Pitt's bidding of fixing up his room for him to bring his bride to. As she busied herself in putting fresh linen on the bed and adding little feminine touches to the room, she wondered what her new daughter-in-law would be like. As a final touch, she tossed a new hooked rug on the floor beside the bed. "There. I think the room looks real pretty. Pretty enough for a bride. I hope Pitt and his bride will be happy in it." With that, she left the room and returned to the kitchen to supervise the preparations for the impromptu wedding feast. Preparing supper was going to be a little more difficult than usual. Her mainstay with cooking, Jenny, was complaining. Margaret had sent her to bed for the day. Still talking to herself, Margaret busied herself in the kitchen. Pitt sure picked a bad time to bring in a bride, with Jenny ailing and all. Sign can't cook, and poor Amy doesn't have enough sense to get in out of the rain, and poor old Aunt Maria is down in her back again. Ann and Alice can't do a thing but tote and fetch and swish the fly brush. But I do want things to be nice and the food good. About time for Pitt to be returning, Margaret looked out and took note of the gathering clouds. Good heavens, even the weather looks gloomy. I do believe it's going to rain. And rain it did. A downpour which continued until Margaret heard the dog barking happily in greeting to his master and the new bride. Margaret put on her warmest smile and went to greet the young people as they dashed into the house to get out of the falling rain. Pitt proudly presented a nervous, disheveled, drenched girl. "Mother, here's your new daughter." Margaret smiled and drew her into a warm embrace as she gave her a welcoming kiss. "Pitt was right when he said you were a pretty girl. We want you to be happy here, but first you must hurry out of those wet clothes. Pitt, take Sally upstairs and see that she finds something dry." She called after them as they hastened up the stairs. "Come on back down as soon as you change. Supper will be waiting."